Yo, good day, gents, and welcome to another episode of Father's Fire. My name is Jody Sedrick, as you know, and every week we get together to explore the joys, the challenges, the triumphs, the sorrows, and yes, the fun of being a dad. And today we're taking a little bit more serious of a conversation because I think it's something that a lot of you listeners either have dealt with, you're working through, and that's the ugly side of marriage, which ends up in divorce. And so, I've talked to a lot of you guys one on one, and I'm like, you know what, maybe it's a good topic to sit down and talk to. And my brother, who is my guest, Mike, welcome.
Hello,
Um,
glad to be here.
Hey, yeah. So I always love chatting with you. You and I have spent a lot of times, especially the last year and a half, as
Yeah,
you have gone through. I wouldn't say a messy divorce, but not a great divorce.
not at all.
And
Pretty miserable.
I kind of chuckle just because I think a lot of times when we're going through something, at least me, when I've gone through something really challenging or really difficult, my kind of go to response is either to get angry or to laugh. And it's like, it's kind of my defense mechanism. So I hope that anybody hearing me chuckle and recognize that I recognize the weight of the topic. I recognize the impact that it has on the family. I recognize the impact that it has on you, the individual going through it. And of course, it has huge impact on the kids that ripples across their entire life. And, a couple months ago, I actually asked Mike, it's like, all right, you know what, as you're heading out of this divorce, is this something that you would want to talk about? And he's like, right now, no, but maybe down the road, maybe I can share some insight that might be helpful to other men and families, because ultimately, what happens with the couples in your relationship ripples down and affects the children, and it really does impact them for a long time. So first of all, let's just talk about you and how you're doing. I mean, this is pretty new for you. You're only what, a month out, maybe 6 weeks out from being divorced.
Yeah, it is. And in a lot of ways, things haven't changed because leading up to this, so, when I got back from Bahrain, I was really struggling with the marriage, really trying to keep things together. And then once I finally said enough and said, look, commit to the marriage or we need to divorce, she really wasn't around a whole lot at all. It was like 5 to 6 nights a week gone. Whether she'd come home or not, I don't know. No one did. And I can't tell you how many nights I tucked in my 6 and my 8-year-old, and my 6-year-old would say, he first started saying, Dad, when mom comes home, will you have her please tuck me in? His wording then changed to, Dad, if mom comes home, will you please have her come tuck me in too? He just quit asking. And so that was really hard, and that we were both in the same house for a few months. That was very, very challenging. There was just friction everywhere you went. But once she moved out, we had, I think, 3 4 months from when she moved out to when the divorce was final. And in a way, things got easier because I could have the house the way I wanted it, not just physically clean and organized, but I could run the house the way I wanted to. And I'm like to think of myself as a more calm person. So I try to create more of a calm household. Now, as far as how I'm doing, the best way I can describe it, it's like a rising stock market where the overall trend is up, but there are some days where I just feel the weight of it. One of them was just the other night. I was like, oh my gosh, like, what about this, this, and this? And the weight bears on you. But I'm trending up like a rising stock market. But, as difficult as it is to say, I don't regret in my situation. I'm not saying this is the answer for everybody, but in my situation at the time, divorce was unfortunately the right answer for a lot of reasons, especially for the kids, because they were dealing with conflict constantly. They were dealing with their mom who would go out partying 5 to 6 nights a week. Would she come home or not? I don't know. And then they see a dad who's, trying to woo this woman who's constantly gone. And it wasn't a good dynamic. So now, at least when the kids are at my house, I can create a calm, clean environment where the kids are less stressed.
So I want to hit on something there because I think a lot of men and couples, but especially men, one day, I mean, yeah, you've kind of had struggles in your marriage, and you and I've talked about that. That for years you didn't really feel like you had a partnership, that you didn't have a helpmeet, and I think a lot of men get into this cycle of going, you know what, I got to do everything I can to make the relationship work. One, because I want it to work, I'm invested in it. And it breaks my heart that we are even having the discussion that we might be separating down the road. Right. And I'm also seeing the impact of this kind of roller coaster that our kids are watching, they're feeling, they're tiptoeing around mom and dad, or maybe one of you more than the other. No, how did you finally come to terms with, I've done everything I could, and the only option is for all of us, for the good of all of us, is that we separate?
It was a long process. So when I got home from Bahrain, so a little background for those on the podcast, I went to Bahrain overseas for a year. I left in June of 2021. I got home in June of 2022. And during the deployment, I was 4 months into a 12-month deployment, and Autumn said she just got tired of not feeling loved and she was thinking about divorce. So, I had done everything I could. We stayed on the phone for hours. I was just trying to do everything. Came home for Christmas leave. I thought things were good. She did not. And then when I got home in June, things really blew up because she was making some pretty bad choices. Um, and I still stayed. I still stuck it out. I was doing a lot of praying. I was fasting every Sunday. Oh, Lord, heal my marriage. And I'll come back to that in a second. But I remember it was the second Sunday in October. So I'd been home, almost 5 months. And I knelt down to close my fast, and I just felt this very distinct impression. This is, give it to the Lord. I was like, well, I don't really know how to do that, but okay, here you go. And it was at that moment I started to feel it's okay to let go. Now, I wasn't set to let go of the marriage yet. I still wanted it to work. And we actually had probably two more. I use the word good very, very loosely here, but 2 good weeks. And then there was a pretty big blow up. And after that, I was like, oh my gosh, I'm ready to be done. This is clearly a dead marriage. And I really wanted to pull the trigger, but I couldn't because now it's the end of October. And I don't want anything to happen with the kids over the holidays. And so there were times like, I still did everything for her birthday and Christmas that I should have, but my heart was, I tried to do nice things. There was still that shred of hope. Oh, maybe she'll, but she did not. Going through the holiday, there were many days throughout the holidays. I'm like, yeah, I can't wait for this to be done. There was another time. So that was October, and then December, I went to the temple. For those who aren't of our faith, there's the church, and then there's the temple, which is a higher structure, and there's more strict requirements to go in. And when I was in the temple, I had a very distinct impression that says, "You will never be in here with her again." And I just started crying. I was like, "Yeah, I know." So then I just made it through the holidays, but after the holidays, I just asked her if she'd be willing to fully commit to the marriage, and she said no, and she didn't know when she would. But it was really a process. To answer your question, it was a process starting in October where I started to feel yeah, it's okay to let go. And then over the next month or two, I would be able to see things essentially for what they were. I remember this one time in December, we were driving somewhere. I don't remember where. I looked over at her and I thought, this marriage is completely dead. But it was a process going up to it. But I think that process started in October.
I like the phrase that you used a couple times about the relationship being dead. And I bring that up because whether you're in the LDS faith or you're in other faiths, Protestant, Catholic, you know, we have this idea that when we got married, that the words that we say is till death do us part. And rightfully so, we tend to think of that relationship going until we actually physically die. But I think sometimes, especially in your case, is you came to realize that even though you guys were walking together, you were living together, you were going through the motions of being married, but your marriage was already dead. And at that point, that's when you realize, you know what? There is no hope for us in this situation to resurrect this relationship. And I think it makes it even more challenging for those of the LDS faith because we have a very strong sense of eternal families, that families can be together forever and that those unions are. And so I know that had to have been really challenging for you emotionally and spiritually to go, you know what, my marriage is dead and it's okay. It's okay to move on to something new. Um, and I appreciate that it was a process, that you were working at it, that you were trying to save it, that you were doing the things, but it really does take two people to rebuild something that has decayed and rotted, and it takes a lot of effort. And if one of you is not willing to do that, in essence, that cripples any hope of that marriage coming back to life.
Yeah, and it absolutely does. And that was one thing that I realized was so there for about a month, I saw improvement in our marriage from where it had been a few months before. But I realized that the improvement in the marriage, it was enough to sustain co-parenting roommates, but it wasn't enough to sustain a marriage and provide that example to the kids. And it was exacerbated when she would go out and party till 3 in the morning on Saturday night. That's not good for me or for the kids. But yeah, it's definitely a process, and just being able to take a step back and look at things and realize, like, yeah, this is not sustainable. I knew that to keep going the way that I was, I could see it taking a toll on my mental, emotional, and physical health. I mean, so in July of 2022, I lost 15 pounds in 1 month, and I don't
Mm.
gain or lose weight. The six pack looked awesome, but I lost a lot of weight. And that was just due to the stress and sleeping 2 hours a night because of everything that was going on. But it was difficult. But when I got to the point where I could take a step back and realize not only is this union not good for me, but this relationship, it's detrimental to the kids. I have to change it, if nothing else, to provide a better example for the kids.
Yeah, so let's talk about that. Your kids are watching this ugly dynamic, but they're also seeing because, and I've talked to your sons, in particular Logan, and he's like, look, it was interesting to watch my dad try to save the marriage, right? So on one hand, I see your kids going, wow, I saw dad trying. I saw that he was trying to create a family for us. He was trying to create a good situation. but in the end, we could see that the marriage was totally crumbling. So how have you worked with the kids over, during the process of, all right, we're going to divorce, but then post divorce, there's a lot of broken hearts. There's a lot of questioning that goes on in a kid's heart. And so how have you navigated that now, both pre-divorce and post-divorce?
So pre-divorce, so leading up to the divorce, before we had actually told the kids, I would still try to be affectionate and try and work the union, but if she wasn't having it, eventually, so the first month or two I got home, my focus was just on Autumn, just on Autumn, just on Autumn. Let me just fix the marriage, we'll be fine. Fix the marriage. And then I was like, you know what? I need to focus on my kids. So it was just something simple as time. So, and then the other part of it was honesty and apologies. So this was about this time last year. Autumn and I had a big fight, and she went out, and I sat the older kids down and says, "Look, guys, I apologize. You know, anytime Autumn and I would have a fight, I would go and apologize. I says, look, guys, I am sorry. Not only that Mom and I are fighting, but there's a quote that says the most important thing a father can do for his children is love their mother. I says, guys, and I haven't done that. I'm sorry for that." And Logan said, well, what do you mean, Dad? We never thought that you didn't love Mom. And so we ended up having a really good discussion there. So there would be periodic times I would have a fight. I'd always try to apologize to the kids, and the youngers, I would always try to tuck them in at night. So then we told the kids about the divorce, and that was that was a dark day. But she would continue to go out, not tell anybody where she was going, when she'd come home, nothing. So I was home with the kids. Fortunately, I can't speak highly enough about my bosses who gave me complete and utter flexibility to deal with this. I cannot speak highly enough of them. So it would be, I would set up the routines. Hey guys, we're going to do dinner. Okay, we're going to do chores. Hey, let's read scriptures. Let's say prayers. And then recognizing things that were a little out of the ordinary. They weren't because they were being bad. I know, Jody, you brought up on one of your podcasts how shortly after this, my daughter Piper, I'd tuck her in bed and give her that time, but she just needed to come downstairs and she'd sit with me in the recliner for like an extra 10 or 15 minutes, and we'd watch YouTube. I remember one time my ex-wife, she's like, oh, she's just doing this because she wants the extra attention to stay up. And I'm like, exactly. She wants the extra attention because her parents are going through a divorce and you're never home. But that slowly faded away. And then the other part of it is, and this has kind of been both pre-divorce and post-divorce, is recognizing certain triggers the kids have. So they're going to get angry a little easier. The fits are going to come a little bit sooner, a little quicker. There's going to be some drama that's associated that with other stuff, but it's not, I'm trying to think of a specific example, but if a kid gets mad about, picking up their room and really loses it after a divorce, it's not about picking up their room. That's just a trigger. And so it's just recognizing those triggers and walking that tightrope of, hey, I'm still your dad, and I have to discipline you, because one thing I've read, I don't know how anybody does divorce without Google, but one thing I've read is that it's very easy in the wake of divorce to just want to give your kids everything and just spoil them and just, hey, here, just take all this stuff. But you have to maintain structure and you have to maintain discipline. And so it's walking that line of, hey, I love you. I know what you're going through, but it's not okay to chuck this toy across the room. So it's kind of tailoring the parenting a little bit, recognizing, okay, they're not getting mad about this. It's just a trigger for the divorce. And that can be difficult to do, but I would just say, the other thing I want to add, I know I'm getting long-winded, is honesty. So in my particular instance, there was a lot of lying, not on my part. There was a lot of lying that led to the death of our marriage. And so one thing I told the kids when we told them about the divorce is I told them, you guys are always going to get the truth from me. And so I've had to answer some pretty hard questions, but I've always been honest with them because I felt that they needed to understand truly why our marriage failed. So that way they can gain a full picture of it, not just for their parents' relationship, but also for any relationship that they can have in the future. So I'd say apologies, honesty, love, maintaining structure and discipline, as well as just spending time with them.
Yeah, one of the things that I think about, especially when you're trying to parent children who are hurt, a lot of times they're using cleaning up the room or folding clothes or doing the dishes, and they're lashing out because they have to do a chore when they're really lashing out because at the core they're hurt. They're trying to figure out what happened, where they fit, who's still in my life, who can I turn to. And one of the things that that I think is really important, and I've seen you do this, is making sure that your kids know that you are a safe place. And that includes not just having a safe, clean, healthy, emotionally healthy home, but also is having a safe place to come and vent. And I think a lot of times we as parents, especially when our kids are working through tough times, we end up being the punching bags, and our go-to response is our pride goes up and we double down and say, I'm the dad, you'll do what I say, and don't talk to me that way, right? Instead of stepping back, taking a breath, and going, all right, what's the real issue? And you don't even necessarily have to ask that, but I know, like, when I dealt with trauma with our kids, that on those days where they lashed out or they were short or just in my face and nasty, when I would discipline myself to not react and go, what's really going on? I know you just got mad at me, but I know there's more. And sometimes they put up the shield and they don't want to talk. But I found that if you can discipline yourself and go, all right, I recognize that you're upset about this, but the real issue is something else. So let's talk about that. Let's explore it. Did I do something? Did friends at school do something? Are you disappointed with mom or whatever? Right? There's so many dynamics, but I think a lot of times we react to the symptom instead of the root problem.
Yeah, it can be very difficult. I think my oldest daughter is a good example. And I mean, I credit all this to you after I talked to you, how to deal with this after you went through it. Because I told her she was really, really struggling, and I told her, says, if you need me to be a punching bag for you, I says I can do that because I know you're going through the divorce and it's really hard. And so then she just started, like, anytime she had to do a chore or homework or whatever, she'd like throw a fit. And one day she's like, and she'd like scream at me. She says, "Dad, you said that I could be your punching bag." I says, "You're right, bug. And I will be your punching bag, but you still have to clean your room. You still have to do your homework. The leeway for me to be your punching bag and vent your frustrations is there, but it's not an excuse like, oh, I don't want to do the chores, Dad, you're my punching bag." So it was very difficult, finding that line of, here, take it all out on me, go ahead. Because one thing to remember for any of those listening who might be going through a divorce is that children are the first victims of a divorce. And I feel absolutely horrible for mine with what they have to go through, because none of it is their fault at all. This stuff, it's all entirely on my ex-wife and me. That's it. But they unfortunately have to deal with this mess that they in no way caused or contributed to.
Yeah, I love that sentiment because the kids are thrown into chaos, uncertainty. and they're trying to deal with their own loss, their own anger, and giving them space to work through it with you, I think is really important. And creating a safe place where they know that no matter what, they can go to dad, right? And you're going to hear them out. You're going to work through whatever issues. And I think it's important to recognize that it's going to take time. Not all wounds are healed overnight. Some of them take days and weeks and months and even years. I mean, you're going to see your kids will deal with it in some way their entire life, and that's just the reality of what has happened, right? I look at our kids and bringing them in as adoptees and blending them into our family. There are things that happened prior to them coming into our home that they are still emotionally working through, and I have to create an environment of trust that they can come and talk to me and we can work through it, and that I'm willing to say I'm sorry when I'm short and not understanding and blow my cool, right? To be and I think that's really important that we as dads own our crap, right? You didn't cause everything, and you may have brought baggage with you, and that wasn't my fault, but I'm going to own how I'm responding today. So, looking at your kids now, what has been kind of helpful for them to work through their own trauma and loss into a healthy and a positive space these last month or two, couple months?
A lot of it's been honesty because I think knowing what happened has helped them to kind of understand it and process a little bit more and get the answers to the reasons why. Why did this happen? We made it very clear when we told the kids about the divorce, like, none of this is your fault. But honesty, and then just one thing I try to do is just simply be available. So when it's my time for custody, like, I'm home. Like I said, my bosses kind of let me, come in after they get on the school bus and get home before they get home. So I try to be here. So even if they are just playing at their friends, I'm in the kitchen or I'm in the living room, because what I don't want to do is have a closed door, because I think closed door says a lot. And they dealt with a lot of closed doors when I was overseas, because their their mom would be in the room with the door closed, and so I made it very clear, like, hey guys, that door is going to stay open. It's only going to be closed if I'm showering, sleeping, or if I'm on an important phone call. Other than that, I want you guys to know that I'm available. So I think being available to them is helpful. I haven't done any social activities. I do those when the kids are not around. So if it's my week for custody, I'm home. I don't do any social stuff. Not that I do much social stuff anyway, but rare times that I have, like, hey, it's when the kids are around. So just being available and being honest, I think, has helped them. So I mean, ultimately, we'll see once they get into adulthood, but I think it's been beneficial.
So what's helped you?
Um, you by so you individually, as well as talking to family, talking to friends. I did do therapy for a little while because we were in marriage counseling for a while, and he met with us collectively and individually. And then I met with him for a while, and then after a while, I just said, you know what, I've met my goals. I don't need to go here anymore. But family and friends has helped. And then another thing you hear about is self care. Now, self care is not, oh, let me just go out and party because, oh, I need to take care of myself. No, self care is get enough sleep, go to the gym, eat an apple. It's not just go off and party all the time, because if you aren't good, you're not going to be good for those kids. It's like on the airline when they say, put your mask on before helping somebody else. So, I still went to the gym, I still worked out, um, but I'd say one of the biggest things that really helped me through this was talking to family and friends. They were huge. I mean, I can't. speak highly enough of our brother and his wife. I mean, they have been outstanding. And then I know I've had many tear-filled conversations with you, and I just felt like I couldn't take it. And I don't think that you realize how big those conversations were and how helpful they really were. So, gents, just don't be afraid to reach out and talk to somebody, because you're not being manly if you're bottling something up and you can't take care of your kids.
Yeah, I had a really good conversation on my podcast last week with the gentleman who had dealt with the divorce that was caused by addiction, and he said, emotional trauma is cancer. And I think a lot of us, especially when we're going through divorce, we're dealing with childhood trauma, we're dealing with addiction. A lot of times we're trying to fill the void and the darkness in our heart and in our mind with substance or activity or pornography or a myriad things, instead of going, all right, what is truly helpful to the core issue? And I need to heal the emotional wounds that I've incurred because of where I'm at in my life, and recognizing that it's okay to be hurt. It's okay to be sad. It's okay to be angry. It's okay to go, man, what could I have done differently? But at some point, you have to go, you know what? This is yesterday. This is what brought me to this point. And how do I use where I'm at today as a foundation to build into the future, to build a more connected relationship with my kids, to help them work through their own pain and loss and discover beauty in healing, to discover strength in honesty, strength in going, you know what? I wasn't at my best, but you know what? I'm digging into who I am. I'm digging into my kids, and I'm going to build something out of this. And what I've seen, especially like you mentioned, our brother Chad and his wife Julie, it has been absolutely amazing to watch them build a new life together. And man, I watch them interact and love, and it just shows me that out of the ashes, something beautiful can be built. And I think a lot of times we look at the dark moments, and it's easy to be consumed by the dark moments instead of recognizing that the valley that you're going through right now is preparing you for the precipice. As you build out, that you will be able to look back and go, wow, look what we built out of, and look at what's ahead of us, and look how far we've come. And you'll be able to look at that with joy and hope and optimism, and also gratitude for the journey, the personal journey that you've taken, both willing and unwilling, right? And I think I think one of the things is that recognizing that there always is a dawn just on the other side of darkness.
I think there is, and I think I'm starting to see it now. As you were talking, I remembered, to answer your previous question, another thing that helped is I stayed busy. I kept my hands occupied, which kept my mind occupied, because our house was a disaster area. Like cousin Eddie from Christmas Vacation would have loved it. Um, so I mean, I ripped out the old flower bed, put in rocks, brick, cut down scraggly trees, ripped out an old fence, built a new fence around the pool. Just made my house a beautiful thing. Um, and it was really helpful, especially on those long weekends when the kids aren't here. And I was still a married dude. I'm not going to get on the dating apps or go out, and the bar and club scene is not my thing anyway. So I'm like, well, I need something to do to pass the time other than just Netflix. So it definitely helped me when the kids weren't around and I'm missing them and I'm worried about them and all that stuff to keep my mind and my hands occupied instead of just like, okay, went to the gym, plop down and watch Netflix, because that's not good either to just do that for hours at a
Yeah.
time.
Yeah. Well, I love that, and I have so many other questions, but I think that's a good spot to kind of sit. You know, I think divorce. Nobody wants to go through divorce. Nobody anticipates that they'll go through divorce, right? I think about. I've talked to Judy about this. It's like it's interesting because when you first get married, you're filled with hopes and dreams and aspirations and look at this life we're going to build together. And somewhere along the journey, that started to dissipate. It didn't become, the mundane and the just everyday aspects of life kind of hit you. And if you're not very careful, one day you wake up and you're going, wow, my relationship's in a place where I never thought it would be. And man, I don't want to go through this. But I look at, I guess I think there is hope, right? And I think one of the things that I look at when I see other men, and even talking to Chad, he thought he'd never get married again. He's like, dude, and I think a lot of that had to do with his own feeling of self worth, his own feeling of letting himself down and his past marriage down. And I think that recognizing that, there's a time to move forward, just like you had to work through it and come to a point where, you know what, this is not healthy for me, it's not healthy for her, and it's especially not healthy for the kids. And so we need to do something different. And I love the imagery of that you shared of just tearing down scraggly old shrubs and replacing an overgrown garden and rebuilding and making it fresh and new. And that takes concerted effort. And that may be not only in your home, but also within the walls of your heart and mind, that you need to do that excavation, cleaning up, and rebuilding so that you can move forward in the light of a brighter day. So, any last kind of thoughts before we let people go? Because, man, we've really had a deep discussion today that's sitting on people's hearts.
No, it's tough. For those who may be at this precipice, the decision to divorce was the most difficult decision I have ever done. And there were things that I dealt with in my marriage I never thought that I would have to deal with. And so I'm an Afghanistan veteran. And I remember there was a particular zone where we went in. We were taking some fire going into the zone. Um, and I would rather do that 1,000 times over than go through what I went through with my marriage, because that was easier. But it's important to just work for your marriage, because I I know I have my faults in the marriage. I'll be the first to admit them. And it took a while for me to be able to forgive myself for those faults. In full disclosure, I never once cheated on my wife, ever. But I have my faults in my marriage. I wasn't as kind and loving as I could have been. I wish that I would have been better. Um, but I know that I did everything I could to try and fix it and repair it and make things right. So while I do have regrets for, oh man, I should have done this better, I could have done that better. There's still, my conscience is clean because I did what I could to make it right. So if you are at the point where you've done what you can to make it right, and you can look with a clean conscience, like, yeah, this really isn't going anywhere, we need to just call it quits, and then that's that's a good point to be at, but just understand that it is going to be a process going from I want my marriage to work. How can I win my wife back? How can I make her love me again? How can I make her want to go out on a date with me again? To oh man, I maybe I need to let this go. To oh my gosh, can these holidays just get over so I can file for this thing too? Oh my gosh, let's just get these papers signed so I can move on. But it is a long and difficult process, so just be prepared. It's going to take time, and it is going to be the most emotionally challenging thing that you will ever do.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate you taking the time to visit and being candid and open and authentic and raw, because I mean this is a very raw topic, right? Both for you personally, but also for those who are going through it right now. So guys, I want you to know that I, from the bottom of my heart, wish the best for you and your partner and your family. And that's really why we have these discussions. Last week, we talked about the implications of addiction and the fallout. Now, this week, we're talking about divorce. This is actually um, the last week of September when this will be thing. And this is actually Suicide Awareness Month. I have 7 episodes just talking about our family dealing with attempted suicide and talking to other people who have dealt with actual suicide in their family. And there are a lot of real challenging things that we work through as men, as husbands, as fathers, as families. And the reason why we have these kind of conversations is that hopefully something that is shared out of these experiences will serve as a blueprint of sorts to help you navigate your own challenging experience and to give you hope and to give you insight and to help you feel like you're not alone. And I think we as men need to do a better job of creating safe spaces to go, you know what? This part of my life really sucks and I'm really struggling trying to figure it out. And I've been, like Mike says, I've been very blessed to have a good family that is unified and loving and supportive, and we can call each other and we can commiserate and we can cry and we can celebrate and rejoice together. And I've also had really good friends: Sean Hart, Reed Young, Brent Cotter, Leighton Anderson, who have been men that have had a huge impact on my life because they were there when I needed somebody. I got a call, a text, or they stood out in the street and talked to me. And we need to create these kind of environments. So I hope this episode has been helpful for you, because I know it was hard for my brother. It was something that he wanted to share with the intent of trying to help you as you're going through it. And the same with other discussions that I've had. That every man that I've talked to is trying to figure out how we get through this crazy thing called life, family, relationships, and we're discovering the answers as we work through challenges. We're discovering things about ourselves. We're discovering things about our relationship with God and with each other. And I just hope you guys enjoy it. Please go out and share this episode, share the other episodes. Make sure that you like, share, and subscribe, because we want to increase the amount of men that are impacted by these kind of discussions. So thank you guys so much for tapping in. Mike, thank you for being my guest and for sharing your story, man. I cannot tell you how much I love you, how much respect I have for you, and it is a blessing to be your brother.
Well, thanks, man. I really appreciate that. Don't know if I'm worthy of all those accolades, but it is appreciated, man. I love you too. I mean, you had, remember some of those early morning phone calls for me when I was just I can't go on anymore. But it, you know, you did a lot more work than you realize, and I can't thank you enough for that.
Well, thank you guys for tapping in, and we will check you same time, same bat channel just next week, right here on Father's Fire. See ya.